Now, let's turn to the G7 summit. We're going to talk about President Biden meeting with leaders of Germany, France, and the United Kingdom. And joining me to discuss this is John Sitilides. He's a geopolitical analyst and strategist, rather, and diplomacy consultant for the State Department. Good morning, John.
Good morning, Mitch. Thanks for having me.
And as we mentioned, President Biden is going to speak with three other world leaders today. He's got Olaf Scholz of Germany, Emmanuel Macron of France, and Boris Johnson of the UK. So what is he hoping to accomplish discussing things with those other world leaders?
Well, I think we're facing a very difficult point in the global Western response to the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And what we've seen just the last several days of horrific attacks on the apartment complex on Sunday, the day the G7 summit began, and then yesterday with the horrific near-terrorist attack on the shopping mall in Ukraine, shows that Vladimir Putin believes he can operate within Ukraine with near impunity, and there's very little that the United States or NATO can do about it. And I think what he's trying to do is essentially draw the West into a contest of wills, Mitch, here, because there are three battles going on. One is on the battlefield in Ukraine, one is economic, and one is basically a political contest of wills to see how long the European Union and the United States can endure the kind of pain that the sanctions in some ways have cast as a boomerang on the global West. And politically, I think many people in Europe are beginning to suffer what they call Ukraine fatigue. And we may see that play out here as gasoline goes not from $5 to $6, but possibly $6 to $8 as we approach the autumn. And so I think there's going to be a serious debate within the global West between President Biden and the three major leaders, but also other European leaders and also Asian leaders, about the ability of the West to be able to maintain these sanctions with really no exit strategy in sight right now in Ukraine.
Now, John, you mentioned a near-terrorist attack. That's what you said. What you're speaking of specifically is that he blew up a shopping mall, or rather the Russian military did, and this comes on the heels of yesterday firing missiles into Kyiv, striking a residential building. And so Putin is almost becoming a Bond villain here. Is there much that these world leaders can do to stop him, short of invading Russia? I know we're not calling for World War III here, but I'm not sure what stops him.
In the immediate term, it seems that the Western plan continues to be to arm Ukraine to the maximum extent possible. But here's the problem, Mitch. In some ways, the U.S. is depleting our own arsenal here. We're sending thousands of missiles and anti-missile and anti-tank systems to Ukraine, but we're sending them there faster than we're able to replenish our own arsenal here. And God forbid there's some type of a crisis in Taiwan where we have to take on China, and a good part of our armament, our arsenal, is in Ukraine. So I don't know to what extent the U.S. can continue to supply Ukraine at the pace it has been over the last several months. But the larger problem, of course, is Europe potentially freeloading off of the United States. The European Union as a cohesive bloc is as wealthy, if not wealthier, than the United States. And yet their military commitment to Ukraine is a small percentage of that of the United States. And ultimately, Europe is going to be able to have to defend itself against Russia as the United States gears up for what's going to be the strategic challenge of China in the rest of the 21st century. And most of the thinking right now seems to be very short term, how to support Ukraine tactically with weapons. But there's really not much thought given to what's going to be happening in the fall when heating fuel prices start to rise. And if we think that inflation and energy prices are high now here in the United States and in Europe, wait to see what happens in 60 to 90 days.
Well, you mentioned Europe and how the rest of Europe sort of needs to give more support what the Americans are doing. So after this summit, Biden will travel to Spain for the NATO summit. They got some new members that want to join. What is his agenda in Spain? And are we looking at potentially more help, as you've just outlined?
Well, Spain is going to be dealing with some very thorny issues. With the NATO summit coming up in Madrid, the major U.S. objective, of course, is to welcome Sweden and Finland into the NATO alliance. The problem is that Turkey, which is a country that occupies strategic real estate between Europe, the Middle East, Asia, and Northern Africa, is putting a number of demands on the table to address its requirements that Sweden and Finland stop supporting the PKK, a Marxist-Leninist Kurdish group that's looking to dismember Turkey's southeastern quadrant. It also has a number of demands regarding Kurdistan, the Syrian Kurds, and it's threatening current NATO ally, but its neighbor, Greece, and the demilitarization of its islands in the Aegean Sea. And so Turkey is becoming somewhat of a problem with both the Biden agenda and also the larger strategy to put together a coherent plan for Ukrainian food exports, because Turkey, which occupies very strategic real estate, as we said, is also able to control access from the Black Sea into the Aegean Sea through two critical straits, and is able to speak with both Russia and Ukraine about setting up a maritime corridor. I don't know how credible those talks are right now, but Turkey's got a very strong hand, and they may look to upset the Biden and European agenda at the NATO summit in the days ahead.
John, this sounds pretty bleak. Is there any good geopolitical news out there lately?
Here's the deal, Mitch. Russia has played a very strong hand because Europe has made itself utterly dependent on Russia, not only for gas and for oil, but also in terms of a number of other commodities that Russia provides to countries around the world, the global south. And so what we talk about as a so-called international community response to Russia is nothing of the sort. The global south has largely sat out the sanctions regime, and it really is the United States, Europe, and maybe Japan, which really has played an outsized role in the defense of Ukraine. But I'm not sure that we've really thought through the long-term consequences. We may have believed back in February and March that these kinds of very punitive sanctions against Russia would cause the Russian economy to collapse and for Russia to withdraw from Ukraine. And what Russia is showing right now is extreme pain tolerance, maybe that greater than that of the European Union and the United States. And I really think Putin believes that he can continue to grind on against Ukraine, that we're not going to be able to arm the Ukrainians sufficiently and rapidly enough for a serious defense, and that he'll achieve many of his goals in Ukraine and potentially reach a compromised peace settlement. And that'll give both Russia and Ukraine the ability to refresh their militaries. But the longer term strategy here is going to have to be Europe must defend Europe while the United States defends the United States and our interests in Asia.
All right, John Sidolides, geopolitical strategist and diplomacy consultant to the State Department. Thank you for your time this morning.
Thank you.